McCullough. The doctor, him and I had some conversations earlier in the week, and I'll tell you what, he's got a real great story to tell. When you speak about truth and transparency and individual rights and liberty and freedoms, well, you know what? Here's a guy that's in full support of that. So, Doctor, welcome and thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you. It's a delight to be with you. Really been looking forward to it.
Same here. Well, for the benefit of our audience, we have actually now a global audience, and I'm thanking God for that. Would you share with us basically who you are, your background, and as you're moving forward with regard to the topics that you have been discussing and the issues and the challenges that you've been taking on? Would you share with our audience a bit about all of that, including, I understand you've written a book or two, so please, by all means, share that with our audience.
Well, I'm a small-town boy from South Alabama. My father was a plumber. I grew up in a very middle-class family. Most of my family were farmers. The first of either side of my family to go to college and get a degree. And then I went on to medical school. Well, first of all, in college, I played for the University of Alabama under Coach Paul Bear Bryant, which was really quite an honor. Won a national championship. I was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, had an opportunity to play professional football. And with great consternation, I guess you would say, I've decided to forego that opportunity and went straight to medical school. I'm a physician and plastic surgeon. I have a big clinic in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and we provide all types of plastic and I started writing books about 25 years ago, and since that time, I've written a book a year for the last 25 years, and I have another will be coming out within the next 3 to 4 months. Writing has become my avocation. I don't play golf anymore. I don't hunt. I don't fish anymore, and so whenever I have spare time, I'm behind the typewriter writing. I'm a patriot. My father was a veteran of World War II. About the war and why we were fighting World War II, and so to have something to do with patriotism and what America needs to do to try to get on track.
Doctor, I'm going to share something with you. Believe it or not, this is the second time I did this, or our producer did it. We're going to actually, put this interview on later on in the month, but we are live right now. Could you imagine that? so we're going to have you on twice. We're going to have you on now. I'm looking at the numbers of the viewers, and I'm saying, well, this should not be, because this is supposed to be a recording, but we did it again. So anyway, we're live now, just so you know. So you're going to have a double dipper on this, a special treat for our audience. So, but thank you. So now, well, to begin with, Dallas Cowboys, what position did you play?
I was a center, offensive center.
Wow, good for you. Boy, that must have been a real difficult decision to make. I mean, here you were ready to go into professional sports, and then you decided to go into the profession that you're in. I mean, that's a remarkable. Was it a tough decision for you?
Very difficult decision, and I think maybe the deciding point might be something of interest to the audience, because it tells a story. I think it teaches a lesson. I received advice from a lot of people, and then finally I went to see Coach Bryant, and I said, Coach, I'm trying to decide what to do. I'm struggling. Do you have any idea? Or you have any thoughts on this? And he looked me in the eye and he said, Galen, can you live without football? And nobody had ever asked me that question before. I mean, I played football for 10 years or so. And I thought for a moment, and I said, yes, sir, I think I can. And he said, well, you have a national championship ring on your finger. You've made an All-American team. And I'm telling you can play in the NFL. So you have nothing to prove. So my advice, you live without football, go ahead, get your medical degree, and that will be a long career for you, whereas professional football might be a very short career. So I thought that was, and that was the deciding point that made me decide to go straight to medical school.
Well, I'll tell you, I guess it was a real calling from God, because what you're doing now is critically important to the future of this country. and what we need to see happen in the medical field. So now COVID comes along, and all of these issues that are challenging to the medical field come along. So what have you been doing with regard to all of the challenges that doctors now have, especially when it comes to what happened during the days of the COVID crisis, and perhaps maybe some more crises in the future?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think COVID was more than a happen chance. I think COVID was used to see just how far the American people would go to give up our freedoms and our rights dictated to by a big brother federal government. And yes, we had a disease. There's no question about that. But some of the mandates that came down made no medical sense whatsoever to those of us who understood infections and viral infections and other pandemics and epidemics that we dealt with in the past. And the vaccines that are really not vaccines, they had to change the definition of vaccine in order to be able to call these mRNA products that were being injected into people's bodies vaccine. And the person who developed that whole system, the mRNA system, warned us about that. And he said, this is not what needs to be used for this virus. And so now we are seeing so many side effects and complications from the so-called vaccines themselves. And I read an article not too long ago that said it really showed that the vaccines had no effect, no positive effect whatsoever on the entire pandemic. Because while it may have helped a very small segment of the population over here, the complications and the deaths that occurred as a result of the vaccines equaled everything out. And so this was Dr. Robert Malone, who developed the mRNA system that was trying to warn us a long time ago about this, and exactly what, and he said that every time you have an additional vaccine, it actually weakens your immune system and makes you more susceptible to another virus. And so what I just told you would be considered, quote, misinformation by the powers that be right now. It is not misinformation. It is true information. And any of us who spoke out against the mandates and the system that was being imposed upon the American people were chastised. And fortunately, I was not personally chastised, but I know others who were. And I also read an article recently where 40% of the doctors in America regret the decision that they made to go into medicine because of the restrictions that are placed upon our ability now to do what we were trained to do. That's a frightening story when you think about 40% of our doctors regret the decision.
You know, Doc, you're right. It seems to me that politicians have politicized the medical profession. They've demonized anyone who would not get a vaccination, as well as those who are doctors, nurses, etc. One of the challenges that was presented to me, if you will, from those in the medical profession is that they were threatened with loss of jobs and licenses if they didn't toe the line of the government. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. And one of the things, once again, I mentioned about the advice that I obtained from Coach Bryant, ready to go out into practice. The man that I was training with in facial plastic surgery, I was standing at a scrub sink with him one day, and I said, Anderson, what advice would you give to a young doctor in my position right now? And he never hesitated. He said, son, as quickly as you can, get independent of hospital third-party insurance carriers. Well, that was almost unheard of at that time because Medicare and Medicaid had just come on board. Doctors who had been doing pro bono work were actually getting paid to see those patients and were getting paid at the regular Blue Cross Blue Shield rate, not the current pennies on the dollar or Medicare and Medicaid rate. But I listened to him, and so as quickly as I did, I developed my own clinic. I have my own operating rooms. I have my own facilities where patients stay. I'm totally outside the third-party insurance system. So I'm one of the few doctors who have the ability to practice the way I want to practice, with one exception. During COVID, even though there was strong evidence that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine did have an effect in slowing down the rate of infection, and here's the big if you started it very, very early in the game, in the process, was effective. We would write for ivermectin for some of our patients, and the pharmacies, the big box pharmacies, refused to fill the prescriptions because there was a mandate that came down from the big pharmaceutical industry and their pharmacy associations for them not to fill the prescriptions. And so basically you had pharmacists practicing medicine by refusing to write prescriptions that doctors were giving to their patients. And we show you example after example where patients treated early on did not have hospitalized, and none of the patients that I'm aware of, either in my practice or in the large practice of another colleague of mine, were hospitalized. Zero by treating them early. So we knew that this was going on, those of us in what I call the grassroots aspect of medicine. But big pharma and big government were colluding together to see how far they could healthcare. You go back and you look at Karl Marx and you look at Lenin's writings about communism and how they were going to promote communism and Marxism. And control of the healthcare system was right at the top of the list. Gain control of the healthcare system of the country, then gain of the education system. And so everything that they wrote about that needed to be done to convert the world to Marxism, we saw happening during the COVID pandemic.
Boy, that's incredible. Now, we have thousands of Canadians watching this broadcast, and they're in real dire straits up there. We're doing everything we could to help them with regard to their freedoms and liberties. They're facing a pretty tough situation where it seems as if the government is going down a road that will mandate every single Canadian citizen to get a vaccine. And that's scary. I mean, based on what you're saying, and by the way, it's obvious that what you're saying is now being said by many in the medical profession, and some political people are realizing that what you're saying is indeed factual. So a couple of questions with regard to that. Number one, have you and your colleagues in the medical profession been able to bring this information to our lawmakers? Any committee hearings, any opportunity to testify before Congress? Exactly what went on and where we're headed with this?
I haven't been invited to testify before Congress or any committee, but I do have direct communication with my senator from the state of Alabama. I have a very good relationship with him, and he actually reached out to me and asked me for advice and questions to ask whenever they were interviewing people this. I had some ability to have a little bit of it, certainly as much as probably we should have. It's not easy. It's not easy to break through that ceiling, so to speak, because the big brother government has control of virtually everything. And thank goodness for the few conservative Republicans that we have that are pursuing this.
Has the American Medical Association or any professional associations within the medical field, at the very least, have gotten together and said, look, united we stand? You know, the old saying is, united brings a lot of strength. Has anyone professionally as a group addressed this?
Medical Association sold out the physicians that they represent during Obamacare. Whenever the American Medical Association endorsed Obamacare, they in effect sold out all the doctors that were members of the American Medical Association then and in the future. And frankly, I was a very proud member of the American Medical Association until they endorsed Obamacare. And at that time, I resigned my membership, and others did too. So they've really been taken over now by the left side of medicine and Big Brother. They no longer represent the practicing physician out in the field. They didn't come to the aid of any one of the doctors who was threatened by losing their license or losing their jobs with hospitals or being kicked off insurance programs. To my knowledge, they did not stand behind a single one of them.
Well, I'm glad to see that a number of superior courts and now some of the federal courts are beginning to overturn many of the decisions made by whether it be local governments, county or state governments, mandating that workers and other professionals be vaccinated. So at least in the courts, we're making some headway, and I think that's very significant. The military, there was a big problem where they were doing the same thing. They were mandating that pilots, fighter pilots, and war fighters get vaccinated, and they refused to. So the military decides to deplete the force, and now we're in real trouble because if we end up in a war, we don't have the military manpower to fight a war. Could you imagine the critical position that these politicians put us in? But saying that,
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
yeah, saying that, it appears that the courts at least are beginning to side with us. Here's a question that you may not be able to answer because it's something that's thoughts that I pondered, and I'm watching the news feed here. Where does this end? How do we put an end to this? I have one answer, but I'd like to hear from you. How do we reverse this and put an end to this?
I wish I knew the answer to that, Lieutenant. I'm very deeply concerned about the future of our country because of even what happened within the last 2 or 3 days with President Trump's indictment. It's clear to me that the so-called deep state is gaining power more and more, and they're behind President Trump's indictment. And I know a lot of people would say, oh, with another conspiracy theory. Well, in my books, I remind people something that once you're starting to see something happen and unfold in front of your face or your eyes, it's no longer a theory, it's reality. Seeing conspiracy reality. And in one of my books, very close to the front of the book, I have a photograph of the president who's leaning forward a little bit like this. And underneath it, really after you, I'm just in the way. And I think that was a very, very powerful message. Now, keep in mind, this book was published, that I'm talking about, was published about 2 years ago. And so since that time, all we've seen is they're trying to do everything they can to destroy this man because he is the one person that stands as our champion at this point in time. Now, I do think that there are some other Republican candidates that are coming along who would follow that same principle and stand strong. But President Trump right now represents the conservative, independent, patriotic, the group that want to make America great again. And the group that's in control, in my opinion, and this based on 30 some odd years of research, do not want to see a great America. What they are after is a one world government, a global governance. And the only thing that stands in the way of a global governance right now is a strong and independent and great United States of America. Once they take us down, then it's clear sailing. A one world government is what they're going to have. And it's not going to be a pretty thing. You know, a utopian one world government is where we kumbaya, get along with each other, but that's not what they have in mind. What they have in mind is what we saw during COVID, is they intend to control every aspect of our lives. And one of the things that I did in my research, you ought to do this. Any of our listeners should do this. Go and look up the United Manifesto on Global Governance. And this is a manifesto that was passed by the General Assembly more than a decade ago. And it calls for a one government, a one world currency, a one world judicial system, a one world health system, and on and on and on. And so notice what's happening recently. The World Health Association, WHO, is now promoting controlling all epidemics from a central basis or pandemics, rather than having each country deal with it. They want to take control. They're falling right in line with the UN Manifesto on a one world government. So all of these things that we're seeing are part of what I call connecting dots. And when you start connecting that dot, that you get is a mighty ugly picture. And it's basically that they intend to make, quote, bond slaves, end quote, of us all.
You know, Doctor, I understand that we are in a political war, an economic war, soon to be in a military war, but I also believe we're in a critical spiritual war. You know, I've read that Bible from cover to cover, and what you just articulated is pretty well written in that Bible about the end days, about the prophecies being fulfilled. And it seems to me, and I'm not a biblical theologian, maybe you could weigh in on this since you brought it up. It seems to me that we are witnessing the prophecies of old. We're witnessing what was prophesied during the Old and early New Testament days with regard to the beginning of the end times. Now, I'm not saying that to frighten people, but the reason why I'm saying that is, as you say, these are facts. I mean, these are not lies. These are not conspiracy theories. It's written in black and white in God's word.
It absolutely is. And once again, I've written this over and over again, that this one world government that they're trying to install is a Luciferian government. And if you look up Luciferianism, it's transhuman. Now, take a little bit of time to explain that. What that means is that transhumanism means that we become less human. The whole thing about artificial intelligence that we're seeing coming on the board, coming online, all of that plays right into transhumanism. And they intend to take away our godly powers and other government control everything we do. And George Orwell wrote about this many years ago in the mid 40s when he wrote his book 1984. His is really a book of prophecy, and it used to be required reading in schools, and now I think they won't even let it in the school libraries, which is very in some school libraries, which is very disconcerting. So there's no question about what the master plan that they're following has been laid out, and it's in the book of Revelation. It's been there for years, and we are seeing it fall right in line. And I've actually heard some Christians say, well, maybe we need to hurry up and get this done because we win in the end. So the sooner that we can get Armageddon up and going, then we're going to win in the end. We're quite there yet. I think, God gives us the power. A lot of people say, well, we just need to pray. Yeah, we need to pray. But also there's another thing that I got from reading the Bible myself, and that is that God helps those who help themselves. And he's given us powers and abilities to do things for ourselves. And as a country, we need to get together and unite again and do these things for ourselves. Republicans, conservatives, Christians, patriots, we have been in this whole thing. We've played defense, and the left has played offense. And right now we're being backed up against the goal line. And I think we only have one more chance to save America and perhaps one world government. And that's this next election. And we know that the last more than likely stolen. There's so much evidence there that it was stolen. And we've got one more chance the next time around in 2024. And if we lose that election, if we allow to steal that election from us this time around, I don't think that we can salvage America.
Doctor, a few good points you brought up about being passive. I say this a lot, and some people don't like to hear it, but I'm disturbed that it appears to me that the Americans of today are more concerned about the scores of Monday Night Football, Major League Baseball. They're more concerned about the fun in games, and less concerned about their individual rights, liberties, and freedoms. And I say that because the facts kind of bore it out. There seem to be more and more people interested in entertainment in this country these days than in getting involved in their local elections, their state elections, their federal elections. I mean, I'm in New Jersey, and the dismal percentage of people that come out and vote is absolutely shocking. I mean, we're looking at way under 50%, maybe under 20% at times. They're just not coming out to vote. And my concern is that they're going to regret this the day that this flag behind me is switched to one that's red with a hammer and sickle.
Exactly.
So to your point about, not being passive, and you're right, the Bible says also faith without works is dead. We need to pray, and we need to put the guidance that God gives us to work. And that's where the faith and work equation comes in. So I believe that indeed we can turn things around. When I say we the people, I believe, Doctor, we conservatives outnumber liberals and the Luciferians, as you say. But we truly need to take stock of ourselves. And if we don't care about ourselves, we better begin to care about our children and grandchildren, because they're the ones that are going to inherit what we leave behind. Wouldn't you say?
Well, one of my latest books is called Tomorrow in America, The Battle for the Souls of Our Children. And that's what you've been talking about for the last minute and a half. And if you stop and think about this for a little bit, all the entertainment things, our children are being so distracted now, don't have time to stop and think. When I grew up, and I spent a lot of time in the woods, hunting out of a creek or lake and river, fishing, and I had time where I was there with nature and aware of God's world and could think about things. But now then, the children are bombarded all the time with cell phones and TikToks and things that are in their minds, so they really don't have a chance to sit back and think and connect the dots. And that's part of the plan too. It's absolutely part of the plan. And evil used to lurk in the shadows, but now evil is front and center and makes no apologies, because if you see what's happened to television and the movies, there's so much evil and the movies and books and to feature the worst of humanity rather than the best of humanity. It used to be you'd leave the movie theater and you felt good. There was some uplifting message, and when you walked out, you felt good. Now then, it's almost like you feel like you need to go take a bath when you leave that. And once again, that's not coincidence that all this is happening. They're throwing all this at us. And I do want to say this. There are a couple of things, watch the movies that tell you the story. There was a movie entitled Lucy, starred Scarlett Johansson, and that is short for Lucifer. And the whole story is about transhumanism. It's about a young woman they met on the street. They get money, go in and give a package to somebody at the registration desk in a hotel. And then they brought her in. They started giving her these experimental medications and drugs. And all of a sudden, her brain turned on and she became a genius. And then she got smarter and smarter and smarter. And it was our artificial intelligence. And at the end of the movie, she turned into a large computer. And so if you look at the allegory of that, that is in fact what the big plan is for us with transhumanism and Luciferianism. You know, this all starts back once again in Genesis. God and Lucifer, God and Adam and Eve were together like this, and then Lucifer comes in, begin to divide Adam and Eve, and then from that point on, we've been struggling trying to get back to Eden. And we're a long way from getting there. Matter of fact, I see us heading a little bit more over to Babylon than Eden.
Well, Doctor, as we wrap things up, this has been a fascinating conversation. Would you please share with us the name of that book regarding the children? Excuse me. I'm rather fascinated over that, and I believe a lot of people who are watching might want to just get that book and the name of it and where we could get it. And it's a little blurry, folks. I know we're having technical difficulties with visuals, but what is the name of the book, Doctor?
Tomorrow in the Battles of Our Children.
And can we get that on Amazon, etc.?
It is on Amazon. It's published by Christian Faith Publishing Company. Tomorrow in America, the Battles of Our Children.
I would recommend that people get that. Well, Doctor, one final question. I'd like to have you on again to talk about the biblical perspectives with regard to the crisis that we're facing. Can you possibly do that in the near future?
It would be my honor, Lieutenant. It would be my honor to be there with you. And I want to say one thing too. I want to thank you and all of your cohorts in the police and law enforcement, as well as in the military, for the service that you have performed for our country and your battle for freedom and liberty for the rest of us. Thank you for that. Thank you for this. Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be able to talk with you and your audience.
You know, it never fails when you don't want to have a problem with your throat, it starts to go. Never fails. But at least have a doctor in the house. so, so, Doc, the good thing about today, and this wasn't planned, is that we were actually live. And that's kind of a good thing because perhaps a lot of people at this hour needed to see this. We're going to be airing this on in the near future. I'll let you know. But please, it's an honor to know you. I've made a friend out there in Alabama. And
Yes, you have.
and I would say I'd love to see you on the football field, but I know you're now on the field of freedom, and that's kind of a better place to be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. God bless you. Thanks for joining me.
God bless
folks,
you and all of your.
Thank you. Well, folks, you know, we've talked about heroes in our time. Here's another one right here, a guy that's committed his life, not only to the medical profession, but committed his life to the freedom and liberty and individual rights of not only those of us living today, but future generations of Americans and people around the world. So, okay, folks. So once again, this is the second time we did this, right? We were recording and we're on live, but it was a blessing to hear this true patriot who's a real blessing to all of us. So, okay, folks, I'll be back in a moment.